Yeah, Eric Vanek, I've always understood the concept of roster cloggers. I've even probably podcasted, maybe didn't call it that, so to speak, guys that are just
Hmm.
totally dying on our roster that have no value, no trade market value. Just you're just there because you drafted them. But I first became aware of you, and I feel bad that I missed out on years of that before. I heard a podcast just randomly that got fed to me where you were going through every roster and you were just like, cut this guy, cut this guy. This is why you don't. And it actually gave me the confidence and the motivation to go into my 40 dynasty leagues and start trimming off the fat, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most important things to do in Dynasty for me. You're trimming off that last 5-10% of your roster, and you're constantly churning it. And you're going to find guys like a couple years ago, like I was on Philip Lindsay, before like the training camp stuff got big on him. Jalen Warren a couple years ago. Just a couple of guys like that come to mind of guys that I really made a good profit on just by turning my rosters, picking those kinds of guys up everywhere, and then dropping, a lot of these dead weight guys. So that's kind of what my philosophy has been.
At first, when you started talking about Philip Lindsay, I'm like, but those guys had real utility. What you mean is cutting some wide receiver you took in the
Right.
fourth round 2 years ago, and that when Philip Lindsay becomes available, you don't even have the roster space to get him.
Right. Yes, exactly. So you just kind of killing off these roster cloggers, and you can pick up these, undrafted free agents that are getting some buzz in training camps and OTAs and all that, like Philip Lindsay was and Jalen Warren. So yes.
All right, so let's define, because a lot of people that come in, they hear roster cloggers, they think they know what it means, but let's give it a broad or a specific definition. So, what was if someone said to you, "Hey, Eric, what's a roster clogger in Dynasty?" What's the elevator pitch?
Somebody that is not going to ever make my roster. In a lineup league, best ball league, mainly for lineup leagues. I mean, best balls, you're going to have some roster cloggers as well. There's not as many, but especially for lineup leagues, you're going to have a lot of roster cloggers of guys that are never ever going to make your roster. So why are you even holding on to them? Specific settings in your league. So like, say if it's a no tight end premium or even a 1.5 tight end premium, there's no reason to have 8 tight ends on your roster at all.
Right.
There's, we will go through some of our list that I came up with, but these guys that are free agents currently, like a Cam Akers, a Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, just guys like that, there's no reason to hold on to those guys anymore.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So not only do I want to talk about the specific players, but the reason. So if I drafted, David Bell, the wide receiver on Cleveland a couple years ago, okay, I thought like I was being slick. I jumped ADP. Psychologically, I'm attached to him. He's a little bit easier to cut. But, you talk about Kareem Hunt, who actually once was great, right? And that's the perfect guy. He's sitting on I think he's on my 40 team. He's probably on 15 of my teams. I traded a second round pick for him and Deontay Foreman last year, something where I overpaid to overinsure. So what are the couple of the reasons you think that these guys stay on our rosters? Why can't we detach and just realize they're never going to make our lineup?
It's just like you kind of said, that's a big name, Kareem Hunt. He's won people fantasy championships before. Cam Akers, second round draft pick, highly touted college running back. Leonard Fournette, Super Bowl champion, former 6th overall pick, whatever he was. Just guys like that. Like, we just can't get over that hump of, man, I still think this guy's good. If he gets on the right spot, he's gonna be a fantasy winner again. Hunter Renfrow one of those guys that I had this year. Like,
He's still on my rosters. He's still there.
I love him. I can't figure out why he's not on a roster. Why hasn't somebody picked him up yet? But it just comes to a point where I'm like, man, it's after the draft, it's after free agency, and he still hasn't been picked up. There's I don't want to say something wrong with him, but there's got to be something that's not computing with NFL teams to pick him up.
Yeah, for those listening on the audio podcast, we're getting some really funny names that are in there, and we've all had them stuck on a roster. I saw Josh Gordon on there. Treylon Burks is an interesting one because he was like a first-round pick. You spent a top 5 rookie pick on him in Superflex, and I mean, fantasy managers are coming around on him, right? Like well, maybe not. Maybe like, hey, if I can get a third, but no one's giving you a third-round rookie pick for Treylon Burks. So, I mean, is he a roster clogger, a young player?
I think he's on the verge. If he has one more terrible season where he doesn't do anything, then yes, he is. I think if you had talked to my buddy Scott Connor, who I'm really good friends with, he'd probably say, yes, he's a roster clogger. Go ahead and just cut him now. I'll give a little more leniency just because he was a first-round pick, super talented, all that. I'll give him one more final year, but I mean, the odds are stacked against him with 3 other receivers ahead of him.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you bring up Scott and Treylon Burks roster clogger. He's the like my mother hoards everything in the garage. I'm the opposite. I just throw everything out. I think he's more like how I just throw everything out. He's ready to like cut Jerry Jeudy, Scott Connor. So he might be like a little aggressive there. Slow down. Yeah, I mean it's easy to tell. It's easy to tell someone to throw something out, but when it's yours, it's a little different. Different. So someone once told me about hoarding. If the sentence starts with or ends with just in case, that means you got to get rid of it. Why are you keeping that t-shirt? Just in case, just keeping this receiver just in case. All right. So Eric, also before we get into some specific roster cloggers, you hit it on a little bit, but I want you to flesh it out a little bit more because I want to intuitively understand what is the impact of holding Treylon Burks a little too long. How could this cost you down the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about constructing your rosters optimally. Basically, you want to have your rosters set up. There's tools like the WORP tools that'll tell you, hey, this is what you're going to be using for your league, what you should be having for your optimal roster construction.
Don't skate past that. To explain WORP for like you were talking to my grandma.
Okay, so it's really wins over replacement players. So it's our tool on SouthHarmonFF.com that you can sign up there and use the WORP tool. $6.90 a month. Really great tool. So basically, it's going to average out everybody. Their wins over replacement. How much are they winning for you in a league over a typical replacement type player? Like a guy like Christian McCaffrey last year, depending on your league, was in the 3s or the 4s, so which is like one of the highest.
Meaning that he was worth 3 more full wins over just the average sort of Joe Mixon-y type of running back.
Right.
Or even a little lower. Yeah, I got you. Okay.
And then it's based off of it'll take into effect your league settings, how many you start of this position, is it a 1.5 tight end premium? Is it a 2 premium? Is it point per carry? All that stuff is factored in and shows you who the optimal players are in your league, what you should be targeting. So if it's a wide receiver heavy league, you'll see the line on the graph where all the wide receivers are basically above everybody. So man, I got to be starting as many wide receivers as humanly possible on my team.
Right. Okay. So the impact is obviously the opportunity cost of being able to pick up. I mean, the best free agent pickup of the last 5 years is Brock Purdy in a superflex league, right? Is there anyone that was a better, true waiver wire pickup? I'm not saying like someone's humbly bragging that they picked up some player that everyone drafted in like the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah. Brock Purdy's a really good one. Every year you're going to get a couple quarterbacks at the end of the year. So like Joe Flacco last year, Jake Browning. Obviously those guys aren't starting this year, but yeah, Brock Purdy's a really good one. You can find some guys definitely. There's some running backs that come out of there. James Robinson a couple years ago with the Jags, his rookie year. I bet you he was on a lot of waiver wires. So that's another guy that comes to mind. Wide receivers. Showing my age here, but Victor Cruz back in the day, that's another good one.
And what was
Marcus
the dude on
Colston?
Excellent one right there. Going back, what was the other Cowboys receiver that basically was left for dead? Miles Austin. You remember him? Yeah. Yeah. He was like he had a nice little 2-3 year run. Somebody asked about Taysom Hill. Yeah, that's like, again, it all depends on if he qualifies as tight end, because if he qualifies as tight end, he's literally top 10 tight end. Just put him in there every week, and you're going to get like 5 zeros in a row, and then you're going to get like a league winning week. So I don't think Taysom is roster clogger. It's because you're going to start him.
Yeah. Right. Especially in like a best ball league when you don't have to pick him when he's going to start. And I believe like on Sleeper, I think he is quarterback and tight end. Yeah. So that's 2 spots he can possibly go into for you. Now in a lineup league, when you have to pick him, possibly, but I'm going to still hold on to him, especially in a league where if I'm with tight ends, I'm not streaming is the word I'm looking for. If I'm streaming tight ends, I'll just throw Taysom Hill in there if I don't have another guy in there, and just kind of hope he has that 2 rushing touchdown week.
Yeah, I mean, it's you. If you have Taysom Hill and you don't have one of the big 7, big 8, like I'm always starting him over like a Chigakonkwo or anyone in the tight end 18 area. And even if there was a guy that can go 4 for 40 every week, I want that that crusher.
Upside,
so Taysom Hill at age 33, he'll probably be good till like age 38. Taysom Hill, just hold on.
I'm surprised Sean Payton hasn't traded for him yet.
Can you imagine that? What would it would probably give like a 4th rounder too, or a 3rd rounder as well.
Probably.
Yep. Before we get into, I want to talk about roster cloggers. One other type of way to think about it before we get into some specific players, but how about an injured good player? Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be a star. You're not going to, God forbid, Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt. He's not a roster clogger, but how about someone like Mike Evans, right? I always use him as as a good example of a productive player, but old player. He gets hurt. He's out for say the season. Again, hypothetical, put in whatever player there. And now you can't cut him. Nobody wants to give you anything close to fair value for him. What do you do? And let's say there's no IR for our discussion, because obviously throw them on there. What do you do with those type of cloggers? Do you sell out for pennies on the dollar? What's your philosophy there?
Yeah, usually it kind of just depends on the player. Like you said, if it's like a Jahmyr Gibbs or something, probably not. But like a Mike Evans, even when Cam Akers blew his Achilles out that first time,
that's a good example.
You just sell him for whatever you can at that point. I know Scott Connor and myself, we both were able to get a future 1st-round pick still for Cam Akers. Just sell him right on the spot right there.
Right.
I would even take like a 2nd-round pick for a guy like that. For Mike Evans right now, I don't think anybody's really giving a 1st-round pick. But if you can get a 2nd-round pick, a third round pick, and maybe another receiver that's somewhat useful, I'll go ahead and take that.
But think about like this: if God forbid Mike Evans is out for the year, or whoever, because some veteran's going to get hurt for the year that you're like, I'm stuck with him. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan, whoever it is, it could be a running, even a running back. Joe Mixon gets hurt and out for the year. I mean, who's going to give you anything for that player? Contender's not going to give you something because they can't use them. A rebuilder's not going to want an injured Joe Mixon. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you're just kind of stuck with, who's a good example of this? Nick Chubb from last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
For Nick Chubb. Yeah.
All right. I have Nick Chubb on a bunch of rosters. What do you tell people that have that clog of Nick Chubb on their roster?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, you kind of just have to either just take what somebody's willing to give you. If somebody's willing to give you a 2nd, you can do it. I would try and get like a 3rd-round pick and maybe another running back. Back. Can I get a 3rd in Deontay Foreman?
Yeah.
Guy like that.
Interesting. Yeah. Nobody wants to even have a conversation with me about Nick Chubb. They're like, he has to be healthy, and he actually now is in prove it territory. Like if he goes 12 carries for 48 yards or for 38 yards, he's going to have less value than he has right now. At least, I mean, I know I can get a 4th for Nick Chubb, but obviously I would never do that.
But yet people still love J.K. Dobbins coming off a major knee injury, now a torn Achilles. But hey, he's on the Chargers now. I'm back in.
So is it the age, like age 25 versus age 28, like that sleeper card when you click on it?
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with age as well, and the name of the player too. I mean, both Chubb and Dobbins are highly touted prospects coming into the NFL, so I think that has a lot to do with it too. Just kind of biases. I'm with you. I'm a Browns fan, so I love Nick Chubb, one of my favorite players that's ever been on the Browns. So it's hard for me to get rid of him, but in fantasy, you're gonna have to get rid of these guys at some point and make the smart move.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I have a Chubb on rosters. I've shopped him around. I've tried to include him in deals. Yeah. He has literally 0 value right now. Unless you want to just basically give him away in the dollar bin, which, I mean, Nick Chubb can still come back this year and be a top 20-ish running back. Is that even possible?
I'd probably say no.
Oh, my God. Like, okay, what if somebody, I'm trying to think, let's try to give someone an idea of a trade. Is there a backup quarterback? Would you trade Nick Chubb away for Joe Flacco and a 3rd?
Probably not a backup quarterback. If I can get somebody who's gonna play, can I get a backup running back like I was talking about, like Deontay Foreman? Some of these other.
You would do that? You would do that straight up?
Foreman and a 3rd, yeah. Because I think actually Deontay Foreman is probably one of my favorite pickups this offseason. So yeah, Foreman would definitely be one of the guys.
Yeah, I overpaid for Foreman last year, and I was like upset. Then I was happy. I mean, he's one of these guys. He has Latavius Murray type of rest of career trajectory written all over him, doesn't he, Foreman?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yep, where he's going to show up on teams till he's 33. He's, for now he's productive. Eventually he's going to be a cock blocker, right? A rock blocker. But
I mean, this year he slips right into the Kareem Hunt role that he played last year with the Browns. Jerome Ford's going to stick with his 12 to 15 touches. Foreman's going to do the rest until Nick Chubb comes back. So I think Foreman, at least for the first half of the season, is going to be really valuable. Like, I could see that guy having 5, 6, 7 touchdowns, by the time Chubb comes back. So I think Foreman's a really good guy to pick up right now.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of fun roster cloggers put in our chat as well. But you put together just unbelievable comprehensive list, which, by the way, I'm going to actually use this list. This is a great topic for like other things. So I will, Eric, before we continue on, I want to tell you, like, this, you coming on this podcast is a long time coming. I was going to say I'm a low key fan. I'm a out and open fan. I'm a fan of your podcast. Just tell everyone very quickly, and we'll hit it up at the end again, but all of the guests I have on this podcast are guys that I like listening to. That, in fact, the reason I started this Dynasty podcast, Eric, was because I wanted to ask the questions to the podcasters that I listen to that they just weren't answering for me. So, like, I'm listening to your podcast, I'm yelling at you, and I realize you can't even hear me. I might as well start a podcast and ask you these questions. So, anyone who doesn't know Eric Vanek over at South Harmon Fantasy Football, immediately pause this, go sign up for and go follow him. But Eric, tell everyone the podcast feed.
Yeah, so I do a podcast. It's called America's Game, and it's on the South Harmon Network. So if you go to any of your podcast apps, search for South Harmon Fantasy Football, it'll pop up on there. The show drops on Thursday morning, so you can always come on there. Me and Mike, who's one of the co-founders there of South Harmon, he's on there with me. I'll have a couple other guests here and there, but it's usually me and Mike. So yeah, every Thursday morning you can go on South Harmon and listen to us there. At America's Game Pod on Twitter. Me on Twitter, I'm at Eric Vanek NFL. You can follow me there as well.
Yep, I've linked everything in the description of the video below. Yeah, and Eric, you have a really nice podcast voice, because before I met you or we did any videos together, I was just listening. I was like, and at being someone who enjoys the technical part of audio and podcasting, I'm like, oh, Eric's got a nice podcasting voice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I heard you with Adam, and obviously anyone sitting next to Adam who's got a nice voice too. I mean, if you're standing out there, then you definitely have. I always feel like I have like this Long Island-y, like nebbishy thing going on.
Right.
Everyone hates the sound of their own voice, right, Eric?
Oh yeah, I hate mine. Like, people tell, oh, you have a really nice voice and all that. I'm like, what are you talking about?
I know. Yeah, well, there you go. All right, man. All right, let's talk about, so you put together this great list. I'm just going to randomly pick some teams. Selfishly, these are probably the guys that I have questions about. What we're going to do is we're going to try to hit at least 10 teams today, guys. And then at minimum, it could be 8, could be 12. But we promised in the title of the video, 10 teams. And these are players that are just sitting on your Dynasty roster right now, or at least someone, and just get rid of them. Don't even think about it. Like, just cut them now. Even if the space is empty, you want that spot to pick up somebody. I mean, more or less. All right. AFC East, we're going to start with the Bills. Eric, run through a couple players you've seen on rosters right now, and then that are on the fringe, and then we'll go through whether you think that they should be on Dynasty rosters.
Yeah. So, I mean, I start with this first. Each league, a lineup league, a best ball league, there's going to be different types of players that are going to be on each roster.
Let's talk lineup. Sure. Because that's what 90% of people play.
Yeah, lineup leagues. So, like, if you're still holding on to, like, a Mitch Trubisky from Buffalo, I know he just re-signed there. Like, I still don't even want him. Like, even with Pittsburgh last year when he played a game or two, I was like, do I really want to play this guy even? No. So I don't even really want him. So even if Josh Allen got hurt, yes, I understand in a super flex league every quarterback is valuable, but I'm out on Trubisky. I've seen enough there.
But let's stick with Trubisky, because he represents a lot of guys that are like the true number 2 quarterback, and you just don't want him. I mean, if the unthinkable happens and Josh Allen, he's going to miss the next 2 weeks, isn't he really like, you can get a 4th rounder for him?
Yeah, you could probably get something for him, but what's really a 4th rounder worth,
Right.
I mean, it's maybe you can get it for something, you can use it in a trade later. That's something. But if you actually use that draft pick for a 4th-round pick, now in this year's rookie class that came in, like some 4th-rounders were actually pretty decent. You can get like a Rasheen Ali or a Kamani Vidal. Yeah, Luke McCaffrey. You could get those guys this year. But this was like a rare rookie draft class where 3rd and 4th rounders the previous years were terrible. So each draft class is kind of built different. But
Okay. So here's a couple of guys also hanging on the rosters on Buffalo Bills. I've seen Mac Hollins, who had a pretty good year a couple of years ago for another team. MVS. Let's stick with the receivers here. Hey, these are the receivers attached to Josh Allen. Are we ever really going to use those guys, Eric?
No. I mean, they're kind of 4th and 5th receivers on a weak receiving team right now. They have Khalil Shakir. They drafted Keon Coleman. They have Curtis Samuel. Those guys are all ahead of a Mac Hollins, ahead of an MVS. If those guys can't beat out those guys ahead of them, then I don't really want them, because I don't want this 2 for 20 yards from Mac Hollins every single week on my roster when I can have, any RB on a 53 is a saying me and Scott Connor like to use. So any RB on a 53, I'd much rather have than a Mac Hollins or an MVS.
Now, you did mention best ball, meaning like if you're not even setting your lineup and the best scores just go in. Does the calculus change a little bit with MVS and Mac Hollins, or are they still guys very fringy?
Yeah, I would say if it's a deeper best ball league where you have 35, 40 roster spots, I think having a Mac Hollins or an MVS isn't terrible. Like, that's probably one of your first cuts if you had to make a cut. But in a lineup league, I don't want those guys. In a shallower best ball league where you have maybe 25, 27 roster spots, those guys I probably don't want.
Okay, here's another personal problem that I have. So again, selfish, using the podcast for my own roster cleanup. But the Dolphins running backs, man. Now, we all know about the Jalen Wright that was drafted this year, and then obviously Raheem Morris. Oh my God, I'm thinking Raheem Mostert, and then of course Devon Achane, who is a highly touted, top 5 dynasty running back ish. But that leaves Salvin Ahmed, Chris Brooks, that are sitting on my taxi squads, taking up space. They're sitting in my rosters. So how should people play those guys?
Yeah, and then Jeff Wilson too, that you forgot to mention. So he's on
there.
A
4th for him.
Yeah, so he's there. I still like Jeff Wilson a tiny bit just because he does know that system. We have seen Mostert and Achane already get banged up especially last year, missed a couple games here and there, and they have in their careers as well. So Jeff Wilson, I'll still hang on to. I think he's got the leg up over like a Salvin Ahmed and a Chris Brooks. Now, Salvin Ahmed and Myles Gaskin, who was there last year too, I loved both of those guys. I still do. I hope Ahmed does get cut, and I can pick him back up when he goes to, go back up Minnesota running back or something like that, where he could actually get some playing time. So I still like the guy a lot, but right now he's clogging my roster. I'm going to pick up somebody that's more useful. And if Ahmed gets cut, he goes to a situation that I don't mind picking him up. I'll go pick him up off the waivers. Same with kind of Chris Brooks too.
Yeah, and that's tough because we do want, in draft, in dynasty managers' minds, all those Dolphins running backs get hurt. Like, we're talking about a training camp injury away from Chris Brooks having a good preseason game or something like that. Right. So it's going to be hard to clip guys like that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you've been hanging on to him all year. Like you said, Chris Brooks on your taxi all year.
Yep, and then you have to make room from other guys. What do you think, by the way, is the ideal number of taxi spots in a, let's say start 10 or 11, 20 bench spots? How many taxi spots do you like to see in a league?
I usually 5 or 6. I think most of the leagues that myself and Scott Connor run together, it's usually 6. So yeah, I'm fine with like 5 or 6. I think that's the ideal spot, and I also like it. I don't think they do it on Sleeper. I'm not sure. But on MFL, you can change the setting to where you could do first and second year players. So you kind of give those guys a buffer. You don't have to like cut that rookie that you drafted late or picked up late immediately the next year if they didn't play at all. So you can kind of keep them for 2 years and see how they play.
Yeah, a lot of people do taxi wrong. You guys are mostly right. I'm gonna give you a little more piece of how I like it, and then you tell. And by the way, I want to hear your feedback on this. So
sure.
I think that, again, agree with the 2 years, because what's the point of a 4th round rookie? That Cedric Tillman's going to take minimum of 2 years when you draft him, right? He's not extending, so that it would defeat the point to not have 2 years. But also, it should be double the amount of rookie draft rounds. So if you have 4 rounds, Eric, in your rookie draft, 8 spots. So you can keep guys that you draft for 2 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that, especially if with multiple rookie classes. So I can have, a guy from 2 years ago. I can have, a rookie from this year. Yeah.
And then you make the decision in year 3. Do I want to promote or cut? So
right.
So in a 5-round draft, we have a lot of the 5-round draft leagues I do. They have 10 rookie spots, and I have to offer this explanation like every 6 months to my league. Why do we have so many taxi spots? And then I go into it, and they go, "Well, I don't have any picks." Well, whose fault is that?
Yeah,
right.
That too. It does weaken the waiver wire a little bit too because there's not as many guys out there, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, I don't mind your settings at all. I would actually like it to be in a league like that.
So when you say, well, then we'll get you in our next league. We're probably going to get another startup going. You say it weakens the waiver wire. I see that as a positive. And this is just selfishly. I understand why people like a fruitful waiver wire. I'm just in 40+ leagues. I don't want to have to hit 40 waiver wires. When we used Brock Purdy, when he showed up, sure, I'll take the time because it's obvious, like a starting, or he wasn't obvious at the time, but he was a quarterback that was going to start. But, if there's like some dude that gets 4 for 48 and he's, if Brendan Rice, and he's probably on most rosters, but for some reason, someone like that has a decent week, I'll get him in some, I won't in others. But other than that, I just want him to be on a roster already. I don't want that grind anymore.
Right.
And that's selfish of 40 leagues. So. All right. New England Patriots. Let's stick with the AFC East here, Eric. Anybody, there's I still see Juju. I see Jalen Reagor. Tyquan Thornton's interesting because he's still young. Any of the wide receivers on New England, which one of those guys do you want to stick with? And which one of those guys is just, they're clogging up the roster?
Honestly, I wrote on this list, I wrote 5 wide receivers on here, and I'm just kind of done with all of them. Jalen Reagor has been done for a while, but I've seen him on some rosters. Tyquan Thornton, that was a guy I did not like at all in the draft class. I was not very high on him. I thought he went way too high, and he still hasn't produced in the NFL. He had a decent preseason his rookie year, and then he got hurt at the end and hasn't been the same since. Kayshon Boutte, super talented guy, I don't think it's ever going to click for him. I think whatever happened to him at LSU with the ankle injury, I don't think we still know what the hell happened with the Achilles or whatever happened there. Now his gambling stuff, it's just too much for me. Juju, man, that guy has went from literally the Dynasty wide receiver 1 in whatever it was, 2016. And now he's all the way down to here where we're talking about cutting him off rosters because he's a clogger.
Yeah, I mean, and the opposite of that is someone like DeAndre Hopkins, who's been around longer, and he's a valuable piece, even though if he's not tradable, he's someone that's going to be in your starting lineup in all leagues, right? I can't imagine a team is good enough to bench DeAndre Hopkins. Dude, my embarrassing story, I've told it on this podcast before, is I paid, and again, I think you're a rational guy, you're going to say this is not a big deal, but I paid 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Juju after his rookie year.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the going price for him. It was 2 firsts and a couple other picks, or 3 firsts. I've learned in my past, so that Juju's a perfect one. Odell Beckham, Jonathan Taylor after his rookie year. If anybody offers you 3 first-round picks for any player, just take it, because it seems like if you look back on it 2 years, 3 years later, you should have just took the 3 first-round picks because it was probably a lot more valuable than just any player, honestly.
So Kat, you're talking about after a good rookie year, because right now you'd pay 3 firsts for, some people would pay it for CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, if somebody offers you 3 first-round picks for Bijan Robinson, it's hard for me to not take it, because you look back in a couple years, Bijan tears his ACL this year or next year even, it's... You just look back on it and it's man, I should have just took those 3 first. There's a couple players where it's very, very rare where they just keep that value for multiple seasons. But Odell, Juju, the list goes on and on of guys that failed. And you could have got 3 first-round picks for him. You should have just took it.
Well, the word 3 first-round picks is exciting, gets me all, ooh, smiley. But what if you're let's say your rookie draft is right now, or it's coming up, and the guy that won the league also has the draft. He has 11 and 12. So he's saying, hey, I won the league last year. I'm a good team. I'm going to give you pick 11, 111 rookie, 112 rookie, and my first next year. That's 3 firsts, but those aren't very good firsts. Would you do that?
Yeah,
for
they're
Bijan?
not very good first. Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of look at it and see where these firsts are going to be projected and stuff like that. Make like your projections out for them. If they're all going to be super late, then okay, maybe I need a little bit more. Maybe I need those 2 seconds like you were talking about on top of it as well. But yeah, like if you can get like a 103, a 107, and the 112, I'm probably going to do it.
Yeah. Now think about this, right? Because 111 and 112 and next year's first from the champion sounds low, but if you actually put the players in there, it gets a little bit more interesting. Now I don't know where you are on Michael Penix, but look, if Michael Penix was awarded the starting job today, he'd be picked 6 or 7 in our superflex rookie drafts. I mean, no later than pick 9, right? I mean, easily.
Easy.
So that's what I'm saying. So if you can get Brian Thomas, Penix, and next year's first for Bijan Robinson, I mean, it sounds light, but I mean, a year from now, that could be like such an obvious, oh my God, I can't believe that happened too, Eric.
Right, exactly. And like I said, every draft class is not built the same either. So like this draft class is pretty insane for fantasy talent. It's not going to be like that every year. Like next year, like quarterback is very, very slim next year. We don't even know who the first quarterback is going to be. We have a decent idea of who it's going to be, probably Carson Beck, but he's kind of just like an average quarterback. It's not like a superstar Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson or Tom Brady, whoever it is coming into the league.
Right, he's like a Sam Bradford type, right? Like he's just the best this year. He's not.
Yes.
We had Carson Beck's high school coach on this podcast, and about 4 years ago, maybe 5, he goes, "I guarantee you, this guy's going to be the number 1 pick." That's what he told us, and I was like, and what was at the time was a little coach speaking from a high school, but he's like, "I'm telling you, this guy's going to be the number 1 pick." Interesting. Yeah. New York Jets, Cloggers. I got a bunch of guys. I got Alan Lazard clogging up my roster, but. Let's start Lazard because I know no one's cut him yet. Is he a clogger? Does he have any upside with Rodgers?
He's definitely teetering right on it. I'm going to keep him for one more season just to see what him and Aaron Rodgers can do, because Aaron Rodgers brought him in specifically, and we've seen what Rodgers does with his players that he brings in specifically. He usually gets the ball to those guys. So I think with Lazard, I'm going to hold on for one more season. If by the halfway point of this season he still hasn't done anything, I will go ahead and cut him. Yeah. So I do have him on a few rosters myself.
Yep. And then how about Jeremy Ruckert, who is the young tight end? Was he in year 2 or is it year 3?
This is his 3rd year now.
Third year. Tyler Conklin, he seems to be a popular late round pick. So if you're holding on to Jeremy Ruckert, it's time to promote him off your taxi squad. And you just talked about how you like to trim down. Is he a clogger?
Yeah, definitely a clogger right now. He was a clogger when he was drafted. He was behind. He was the 3rd tight end drafted because they had Conklin and CJ Uzomah at the time.
Right.
That guy's not going to be playing for 2 to 3 years. And here we are 3 years later. He's just now moved up to 2nd on the depth chart. So, yeah, that guy was a clogger when you drafted him 3 years ago.
All right, so stick with this theme for a minute here because I think this is important. A lot of people are picking up. Is his name Jared Wiley, the guy on Kansas City?
Yeah, Kansas City, yes.
Right. So this is Jeremy Ruckert from a couple of years ago, right? Like they're excited about him, well, for different reasons, in the sense where Ruckert was just a good prospect that people liked, whereas Jared Wiley is more, he's Patrick Mahomes' next guy behind Travis Kelce, who everyone's convinced is already retired.
Right. I mean, yeah, I could see your point with that. I like Jared Wiley's talent a little bit more than I like Jeremy Ruckert's. So I'll hold on to Wiley, but you also, Noah Gray is there too. So that's, another tight end he's got to deal with. So is he probably a clogger? Yeah, but I think I'm going to hold on to him just because I do like the talent. A guy like Ruckert, I didn't really like his talent, wasn't really high on him coming out. So that's probably why I would have never even taken him. But a guy like Wiley, I'll take a shot on just because I do like the talent. He was my tight end 3 or 4 in this class. So.
All right, Eric, we're going to take a short break here, but when we come back, we're going to jump into, I'm just going to randomly jump around, pick a couple other teams. And again, selfishly, probably the guys that I have clogging up, and you could explain why or why not they're destroying, they're ruining your dynasty team. We'll be right back after this. And we're back with the RotoWire Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Alan Seslowsky, along with Eric Vanek of South Harmon Fantasy Football, and we're talking about players that are ruining your fantasy team just because you cannot emotionally detach, and cut them. I think on one team I still have Jarvis Landry. I mean,
yeah.
I mean he was in roster clogger territory last year.
Well, yeah, he didn't even play on a roster last year.
Yeah. So there's one league where it's like 40 deep and there's literally nobody. Like,
yeah.
So.
I mean, you'd have to pick up just somebody. I would have to get rid of Jarvis. I should have did that last year.
Who is there anyone that you haven't emotionally detached from yet that's still on your roster that you know intuitively that you should?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit pre-show. Hunter Renfrow is the guy that I can't. It's so hard for me to cut. I finally cut him like a month ago on a lot of my teams, but I'm like, man, somebody's got to pick up Hunter Renfrow. Like Derek Carr's got to be banging the Saints GM's door. Like, get me Hunter Renfrow on this team. So I've finally came to the conclusion, man, I just got to cut Hunter Renfrow. He didn't get picked up at all in free agency. After the draft, there was a couple signings for wide receivers like DJ Chark and Chase Claypool, and he didn't even get picked up in that phase. So I got to say, yeah, Hunter Renfrow is that guy, but I ended up cutting him.
All right. Makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I have to let everybody know that the RotoWire Dynasty podcast is also brought to you by Circa Sports out in Las Vegas. Have you been out to Vegas ever, Eric?
Yeah, I was there in 2021 with Scott Connor, and we were in the FFPC main event drafts. Mm-hmm. Me and Scott actually did a live auction draft that we ended up winning. So doing a live auction draft in Vegas for high stakes was really, really cool experience. I love auction leagues, and to be able to do one live with 12 other people was a lot of fun. So I would definitely recommend it if you ever got the chance.
Yeah, and did you have an auctioneer, like a real auctioneer?
Yeah, there was a guy there. They had the sticker boards like you have a lot of your home league drafts where they put the stickers up and they'll write the prices on there for you and stuff. But yeah, it was like one of the people that worked there for the FFPC was doing the live draft, so it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, Circa Las Vegas now. Circa is the hotel and the sports book that we stay at when we go out there for the RotoWire trip. And they do fantasy football drafts there as well, where if more of like home league, they'll cater to you. They set you up at the stadium swim in a cabana. They have the board there. I mean, they pick you up, your whole league up in a limo as part of the package from the airport.
That's awesome.
So you get there, you get the limousine. Their fantasy football experience is unbelievable. So you go to Circa Las Vegas, check it out. Anyone can book it. They have blackjack if you like playing outside by the pool. I think is the best hotel for anyone that loves sports. It's circalasvegas.com. And also PrizePicks. Have you seen PrizePicks everywhere? If you watch fantasy podcasts or sports podcasts, our code is ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD. Double your deposit over at PrizePicks. Do you have PrizePicks where you're living, Eric?
No, I do not.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yep. Hopefully soon. All right. Back to our roster cloggers, players that are ruining our dynasty rosters. Eric, on Chicago Bears, I still have Velus Jones sitting there. Is it time to clip him?
Yeah, it was time to clip him when he got drafted. So yeah, you've been missing that one out for a while.
All right.
I mean, I was never a big fan of him just because of his age coming in and all that, and then he just didn't do anything his first year. That's when you had to cut bait after that first year. It just wasn't going to happen.
All right, that's an easy one. All right, let me in Carolina, Terrace Marshall. I'm even going to put Jonathan Mingo in here. How are you parsing those guys out if they're sitting on a roster?
Yeah, Marshall, I've cut everywhere that I had him. Jonathan Mingo was a guy I did like last year, still a second-round pick. That offense was just completely broken last year, so I'm going to give Mingo a slight pass. We'll see what he does this year. If he doesn't do anything this year, then he's probably on the roster clogger status for next year.
All right. Rams, I know I'm skipping around a little bit because, again, these are players that I see on rosters a lot, and we'll get into some details momentarily, but Rams running back room. Yep. Please go through the depth chart and let people know who they're wasting roster spots on.
Yeah, so right now it's Kyron Williams and Blake Corum are the two starters right now. I think everybody after that for me is kind of roster clogger for me. Zach Evans didn't do anything last year. He had the chance to take over the backfield last year, and they brought in Darrell Henderson off of his couch. So that kind of shows you a little bit of what they kind of thought about Zach Evans. So I know Zach Evans, highly touted college prospect coming out, number one recruit and all that stuff. It's just not working out. He just doesn't get it, or he's not talented enough, whatever it is. Ronnie Rivers, who backed up a little bit last year as well, he ended up getting injured there, but he did play. I would say he's probably the RB3 on this team right now.
And you want to cut him? You want to cut
Yeah,
him.
I just don't see him getting a lot of playing time unless there's an injury. So I just don't think he's very talented.
Right.
So I'll pick up somebody else that, a UDFA running back that I think can make a roster, or and somebody else's third running back that's out there that I think has a little more of an opportunity. Boston Scott, who signed there as well, like he could eat into Ronnie Rivers. Like, why did they sign Boston Scott when they had Zach Evans and Ronnie Rivers? So that kind of shows me that maybe Boston Scott's the guy over Ronnie Rivers and Evans. So Boston Scott might be the guy that I want to carry, but I'm probably not keeping on him either.
Yeah, Ronnie Rivers. This one is like I'm sitting there. I almost cut him. Like I hit the cut button, and then it said, "Are you sure?" And then I chickened out and hit no, because it's not that I agree with everything you said. It's like the Rams running back. If he gets one clarified start, it was worth keeping him, right? Because I have this one team that won it last year, and it's a high dollar team. So winning a $300 entry league can erase a lot of mistakes you've made in the $50 leagues, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of this also depends on the size of your roster. Like, if you have 35, 40 roster spots, I think it's okay to carry a Ronnie Rivers or a Boston Scott. But if you're in like a 27-man roster, 30-man rosters, and this is literally your last guy on your bench, like, there's probably somebody else better out there to pick up. So,
right. So would you pick up?
Depends on a lot of it.
You said undrafted free agents. This is a very cool discussion right here, because would you pick up someone like Cody Schrader, who's sitting there on the 49ers? Go ahead. Explain why. Would someone like Schrader might be more appealing than Rivers?
Yeah, I mean, Schrader is coming into the NFL. He led the SEC in rushing yards last year. So that's definitely a guy I'm very interested in. He's one of those lunch pail guys, man. He has worked for everything that he's had in his life, kind of guy that you want to root for. So that's a guy that I want to pick up, especially, led the SEC in rushing. That you can't say more than that. On Missouri, no less. It wasn't even on like Alabama or Georgia. He was on a lesser team. They still made a pretty good bowl game, but still, I want a guy like that over Ronnie Rivers, who I think has no chance of ever like having a huge game, where Schrader on the 49ers has a chance to be, a starter or, Christian McCaffrey replacement at some point in his career. So I'll take a shot at him.
I was laughing in the comments when we were talking about Velus Jones. Someone goes, "What the hell is Velus Jones doing on your roster still?"
Exactly.
You see, this is why I wanted you to come on this podcast, because usually on the RotoWire pod, we do talk about a lot of the headline guys. We don't go as deep, but that's why I love your podcast, America's Game, because you guys go really deep. And sometimes, and I know every player that's probably in the offensive side in the NFL, skill wise. Sometimes you guys mention a player, I'm Googling. I'm like, who? Yeah. And then I come back to this podcast and I sound smart because I know who Cody Schrader is, right? You might think like, oh, that's a normal player that everyone knows. No, they don't. So I love that. And if you love doing a deeper dive, that's why I highly recommend Eric's podcast. All right. Rookie roster cloggers too. I don't want to just go off the vet list here. Sure. You see even just call it like 175 tight end premium, something that means something, right? But start one, deeper league. I keep seeing Cade Stover, the rookie tight end that was drafted by Houston. The first part of this is the Cade Stover take. Is that like a bad pick? And then obviously I want you to tie Brevin Jordan, who's still sitting on a lot of my rosters as well.
Yeah, with Stover, it's probably going to be a roster clogger. Honestly, he's kind of in this Jeremy Ruckert stage.
Yes.
I do like that CJ Stroud is there. CJ Stroud probably vouched for him a little bit after playing with him at Ohio State. So I think he does have a little bit of an opportunity. But the opportunity cost to draft Stover was probably in the 4th or 5th round of all of your drafts, or if not off your waiver wire. So like the opportunity cost to have him on your roster isn't bad. And then Brevin Jordan, they just drafted a guy ahead of him. Even though Brevin Jordan had a really good playoffs, he sunk a dagger into my heart in the playoff game against the Browns with that 70-yard touchdown. He just hasn't done anything in a couple of years. So,
well, stop right there. See, that's what you're talking about. Like, I was ready to cut Brevin Jordan, and then he has a playoff game, and you're like, now you can't. It's like, it's Kadarius Toney, different situation, but lived off that game against Dallas when he was a Giant, where he looked like, he literally looked like a human joystick.
I sold him for 2 first-round picks after that.
And the guy was happy to give them to you, right? Like, dude, I bought David Johnson right before he cliffed for 3 firsts. That, going back 100 years ago. So, we all
have those stories.
yeah. It's like every gambling story, Eric, starts off with, I was up really big and then I lost it all.
Yeah.
So very good. All right. So in the fourth round, you would rather have like a running back like Dylan Lobby or someone like that?
So my philosophy is first round, I'm usually taking the wide receiver, the quarterbacks. If there's a first round running back, sure, I'll take a first round running back there. But after that, usually second, third, fourth round. Second round, you could maybe get some wide receivers still, but usually third and fourth round, fifth round of my rookie drafts, I'm pounding running back every time because you're going to get your decision on that running back quickly. Is he on the roster? Is he going to have playing time? And if he's not, goodbye, see ya. I'm picking up somebody else. So you get that quick, instant gratification there on that running back. Like, hey, I know if this guy's going to make the roster. Is he going to have playing time his first year? Is he the backup? Is he the third running back? And if you can make your decision off of that, like, do I want to keep him? If he didn't make the roster, obviously he's gone. So stuff like that.
Yeah. The audience loves you, Eric. They're already, I'm seeing a lot of, action on you here.
It.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to have you back. Even if they didn't like you, I'd have you back anyway, because I told you, I enjoy you. I don't care. Like, I know sometimes, podcasts, they'll chase names with high social media followings and all that stuff. And, some of those guys are great. And I have no judgment on anyone that likes any specific content creator, but I just have the guys on that I like listening to. So
Absolutely.
That's what I
appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely, Eric. And I appreciate you doing here. I asked you about Jonathan Mingo before, and then we tangented a little bit. So Mingo, if someone offered you like Luke McCaffrey for him in a trade, because would you hold on to Mingo or basically trade him for a fourth is what I'm saying? Is he clogging up your roster?
I think I still want to hold on to him just because I thought that offense was broken. But if somebody offered me Luke McCaffrey for him, I'm okay like making that swap. I'll go ahead and it's kind of like a reroll, or using the pick that would have been Luke McCaffrey. Maybe I can get a Ray Davis or something instead with that draft pick. I'll go ahead and do that. Like if somebody offered me like a 307 for him, sure, I'll take it. I'll take the 307, re-roll it onto somebody else, and kind of take my little bit of profit loss there because you probably drafted Mingo in round 2 last year.
I'll tell you a trade I made. I gave away Mingo for Spencer Rattler in a super flex where I have Carr.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's no problem with that at all. I think that's a pretty good deal for you, especially if you have Carr.
Right. I mean, Spencer Rattler could just be sitting there rotting for 2 years before he even gets one like injury start. I mean, Derek Carr doesn't get hurt. That he's not one of those guys that you're like, oh, he's always hurt. Mm-hmm. So do you have any hope for Mingo, or is he basically Treylon Burks next year?
He's teetering on that, but I was a Mingo fan when he came out. I thought he was going to be really good for them, but like I said, that offense was terrible last year. But I do have high hopes for them this year with Dave Canales coming in. If nobody knows about Dave Canales, 2 years ago he was with Geno Smith and resurrected Geno Smith in Seattle
as the quarterback coach, right?
As the quarterback coach, yep.
Right.
And then he went to Tampa Bay last year to be their offensive coordinator, and resurrected basically Baker Mayfield into, Baker Mayfield had a top 12 quarterback season or something close to it, led them to the playoffs. Mike Evans had a huge year. So I have hope that he can take a first round pick, that everybody thought Bryce Young, number 1 pick overall. There wasn't really, sure, there was a couple people that said Stroud or whatever. In hindsight, yeah, Stroud, but a lot of people had Bryce Young very, very high. So I'm hoping he can resurrect him a little bit.
It was 75-25 Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Right. That was the consensus. Like, yes, we know, I'm sick of hearing, I had CJ Stroud number 1. Okay. I had him number 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got it right. Yeah. You got it right. And it's like, I loved Puka. Did you draft him in the first round of your rookie draft? No, you didn't.
No.
I'm just shouting it. So if you really loved him, you loved him when it didn't matter. You didn't love him, you hit the lottery. You didn't, like the guy who wins the lottery, who goes to your grocery store, he doesn't have any skill. He just bought the right ticket at the right counter. That's all you did.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's, I'm yelling at the cloud right now. Nobody is really. So a couple quarterbacks that I want to ask you about again, because it's not that these guys are high profile names, Eric, but they really need to, like Tyler Heineke. A couple years ago, I was pumped to trade a second round pick for him. Gave me a year of bridge starting, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to keep him because he's the, he's the QB2 on the roster.
Yep.
Now, is he even worth like holding on to? Go over the quarterback room right now for Atlanta and what the situation is.
Sure. So as soon as Roger Goodell came up for the 8th pick and they said Michael Penix Jr., Taylor Heineke died right there. So that was cut him immediately right when that happened.
Can he end up like backing up, like getting traded for swap 7th rounders if Aaron Rodgers got, well, not, that's a bad example because they now have, but is there anyone that a team that just doesn't have a backup where basically Heineke would be a better option than they already have?
Yeah, there's definitely that possibility if something happens. I know Heineke took a pay cut before the draft to stay on basically as the backup to Kirk Cousins, and then they went and drafted Penix. So Heineke kind of got double screwed on that one. Got less money to be the 3rd quarterback, so that sucked for him. I could see him being a little frustrated with that situation and wanting to go be a backup somewhere. If there wasn't a quarterback injury this offseason that happens, that's definitely somebody that could go be a backup somewhere else for sure.
Denver quarterbacks, Bo Nix, rookie. 12, what was he, the 12th overall pick, something like that?
Yep.
You have Zach Wilson, who they traded a 7th for, and then you have Jared Stidham, who's actually been good in the NFL. Clipping any of those guys? Because I know a lot of people have that situation.
Yeah, so Jared Stidham, it sounds like he's kind of been doing really well in OTAs and all that, and that's a guy Sean Payton paid a pretty penny for last offseason to bring him as the backup. I think Stidham has the leg up there as the backup to probably Bo Nix. That leaves Zach Wilson as the 3rd quarterback on one of the worst quarterback rooms in the whole NFL, so why should I holding Zach Wilson on that team? So I think a lot of people need to look at Zach Wilson and just cut him. Let it be somebody else's problem.
Oh man, but I mean, what's like the least valuable asset that you'd rather have that's mostly available than Zach Wilson? I mean, would you rather have Alan Lazard than Zach Wilson?
Yeah, I'd rather have Alan Lazard.
I mean, that's a bad one too.
Yeah, I mean, like $10 a fab, I'd rather have.
How about Cedric Tillman, or on the Browns, or Zach Wilson?
It's Tillman. It sounds like Tillman's going to end up being one of the outside starters still. So I'll definitely take a starter over Zach Wilson.
How about any of the Allen Robinson on the New York Giants?
Yeah, he's
or
cooked.
Zach Wilson. Okay, he's dead.
I'd rather have Zach Wilson over Allen Robinson.
I'm giving you some easy ones, some bad ones. How about okay, all right. So you guys get the point, though, right?
Yeah.
Quarterback room in Arizona. Obviously, Kyler Murray back to full health. They trade for Desmond Ridder, and they still have Clayton Tune on the roster.
Yeah, so Clayton Tune is definitely a cut for me. Desmond Ridder, I just put him on this list because I don't like him. I just don't think he's very good. If you look at his PFF grade last year, of the 38 qualified quarterbacks, he was 38th. So he's just never been very good. If you want to hold on to him because you have Kyler Murray in case he gets injured, I'm fine with that. But like, it's just having Desmond Ridder on my team, no thanks.
Yeah, well, Ridder, I think, because the team context is so good. Everyone loves Marvin Harrison. He's wide receiver, what, 6 in Dynasty already?
5 or 6. Yeah.
5 or 6. Michael Wilson had 2 banger of games to close the season. And it's so easy to see him being the guy that, like, shoots up to the top 15, top 18 receivers next year, or before. And then Trey McBride is tight end 1 in a lot of rankings, no less than 3. So don't you want like generic quarterback there? I mean, that would be my question, because I have Ridder in a lot of leagues where I could pick up an undrafted free agent or a decent player.
Sure. I mean, let's look at last year, though. Desmond Ridder, he had Kyle Pitts, he had Drake London, he had Bijan Robinson. He had the talent, too, and didn't do anything last year. So that just kind of shows me, he can't. Is a whole new offensive scheme going to change it? I don't know, maybe. I mean, like I said, if you have Kyler Murray, I'm okay holding on to him just in case Kyler gets hurt. I like to hold my backup quarterbacks to my own starters. But, yeah, if I'm not a Desmond Ridder fan.
Eric, that was the best smack away that I've ever been verbally smacked. I said he's got good weapons. You said, and then you named better weapons that he had last year. I guess the only like way I can not tap out of this is I'll throw the Arthur Smith thing at you. That's always safe, right?
Yeah, I'd rather have Drew Petzing than Arthur Smith for sure.
Yeah. Trey Lance is always someone that we get questions about on the Dallas Cowboys. What are you doing with him, man?
Yeah, I'm still holding on to him. Yeah, he is a free agent at the end of next year, so that gives me some hope that, okay, maybe something happens for him next year. He can at least maybe go into a spot to be in a competition, kind of like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are this year. Maybe Trey Lance gets that shot somewhere next year. So definitely going to hold on to him, especially because he's a rushing quarterback, and the rushing quarterbacks in fantasy are so valuable. So I'll hold on to him for sure.
The other guy, I felt that E's cutting. You could just do like lightning round on a couple of these guys, Eric.
Sure.
Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, who's on Detroit.
Yeah, he had that shoulder injury last year that took the rest of his season away. So, and he's kind of buried now. Like they have Craig Reynolds, obviously Gibbs and Montgomery. They drafted that Siona Vaki in the 4th round, and he's going to convert from safety to running back. So obviously they took him in the 4th round. They're going to have him over Zonovan Knight, who they got off of waivers. So he's kind of buried on Detroit.
All right. Sky Moore. People are not ready to cut. He's on rosters in every league. He's not on any waiver wires. You're ready to clip him?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. He's had 2 seasons or 3 full seasons now to do something, and just hasn't. They added Xavier Worthy, they added Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice is still there, Kadarius Toney they're still keeping. They signed McCole Hardman. I mean, there's just so many other guys. They played Justin Watson a lot last year. He's still there. I just don't see a path for Sky Moore to have any significant playing time outside of major injuries to that room. So
not even like a second team boost, like, the Giants signed Sky Moore. Nothing, right? You don't want that guy.
Yeah, I might kick the tires, but like if he can't do it with Patrick Mahomes, then what are we doing?
You can't do it with whoever the next quarterback of the Giants is. I'm going to make for the last couple of minutes here, I'm going to make the degree of difficulty go up. I always want you to assume 30-man roster, our start 10 leagues. So these are tough calls. Indianapolis, Alec Pierce, is he somebody that's just sitting there and you're ready to clip him if a running back you like pops up?
Absolutely. Yeah. Alec Pierce is probably going to be the 4th wide receiver on Indy, I'm thinking, with Adonai Mitchell and Pittman there, and Ashton Doolin's coming back off of a ACL injury. I like Doolin better than Pierce. I mean, Pierce has had 2 years to do something, really hasn't done anything. I think he's going to be clogging some roster, especially like a 30-man roster where it is a tough decision. Yeah. I don't see him having a big season. Josh Downs is there too. I forgot Josh Downs. So, yeah.
Yeah, just for clarification, Josh Downs is not a roster clogger. He's someone
no.
Yeah. He's Deshaun
I just forgot
Jackson
to mention
light.
him.
Yeah. Right, like you say, Deshaun Jackson light. Right, like you'll in a deeper league, if you're forced to start him, you can have that boom week. Other than that, it's like, well, Deshaun was a little more consistent. I meant late career. All right, John Mechie is a player that's sitting on my roster. We talked about Houston a moment ago, Eric, and we like the environment. And now there's some good camp buzz about Mechie. I don't know if that's just like trying to give the guy confidence. Is he a roster clogger?
Yeah, he's a roster clogger for me. I mean, I don't see him playing any significant snaps. They obviously have the big 3 receivers that they have. Noah Brown, they just re-signed, and Noah Brown had a couple splash weeks last year. They traded for Ben Skoranek, who's like a wide receiver, fullback, hybrid, kind of weird player. Robert Woods is still there too, who's a veteran. So, I mean, there's so many guys there. Xavier Hutchinson's still there. So, yeah, I'm just out on Mechie and a lot of these back ends like Robert Woods, Skoranek. I don't want any of those guys. They're all cloggers to me.
All right, I'm going to end with a doozy here, Eric. Malik Willis is sitting on a bunch of my rosters, and Ryan Tannehill. Malik Willis at least is still on the Titans. Tannehill seems like the first guy that's going to get the call when there's an injury. Or would you cut either? Well, break down both of those guys, and obviously they're connected because they were both on Tennessee for the last couple of years. So roster clogger or hold on to these guys in Superflex.
Tannehill, I'm still going to hold on to just for what you said. He is probably the first quarterback somebody's going to call if there's an injury.
Why do they do that? Why do they do that, though? Why do they wait till there's an injury? Why don't they just put him on the roster?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I just don't think they need him at the moment or whatever. I don't know. Or it's just Tannehill's camp saying, I'm going to wait for the best opportunity. I don't want to go sign with, Cincinnati, you'll say, and I have to compete with Jake Browning to be the backup where I could be the third, Right. They're going to wait until they have an opportunity to okay, I have a legit shot to be the starter here if I go in and prove myself. So
right.
Tannehill's definitely a guy. Willis, I mean, they signed Mason Rudolph, so they kind of showed you that Malik Willis is the third quarterback. I rarely keep third quarterbacks, so Malik Willis, unfortunately, he's a roster clogger.
Yeah, I remember when Malik, you do a couple rookie drafts before the real NFL draft?
South Harmon does a lot of those, so I ended up doing a lot more than I usually do this year. So I had about 4 or 5 this year.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because Malik Willis, he was a top 5 pick in a lot of those drafts. Yep. And we do every year. I participate in a draft where we draft the whole player pool the day of the NFL draft, but before the draft. So you can imagine Malik Willis was like a 2nd-round startup pick. Someone thought they were getting cute, funny, fresh.
Right. Before we do wrap up too, I think you missed the most important part. And that's the list at the very, very top of the document. And that's the current free agents that people are still holding.
Let me set you up for this. Set you up for it. And I agree. This is the most important part. But we mentioned a couple of these guys, but yes. So they're the biggest roster cloggers are the guys that were, I say yesteryear. They were David Letterman, right? They were stars in their day. And I just see Rob Gronkowski cut recently, right? In a couple of weeks.
That's just a guy who's not paying attention.
Right. Well, sometimes, yeah. So there are free agents that are still possibility. Like there's like that little tickle that they're playing that you should absolutely cut off your roster. Go through the list and give me a little bit about each one.
Sure. So I still see people holding on to Tom Brady. There's always those rumors. Oh, is he coming back? Like, no, Tom Brady's done, guys. So go ahead, cut him. Cam Akers is one that I still see on a lot of people's rosters. People picking him up still. Like
I have him. I have him.
This is his 2nd Achilles tear. Like it is extremely tough for one Achilles, any running back to come back from an Achilles tear. Just one. Like the only one that I can think of is Deontay Foreman, and that took him like 3 or 4 years.
Right. And
that really came back from it. Yeah. J.K. Dobbins is coming back from it this year after a knee surgery. James Robinson hasn't been very good since he came back from his Achilles tear either. So it is extremely rare for Achilles tear running backs to come back. This guy has 2 of them. He's cooked. He's done. Just put him on your waiver wires. Don't pick him up. Let it be somebody else's problem.
I got one because we talked Hunter Renfrow. You mentioned Leonard Fournette. Julio Jones, obviously, that's cut. We're not going to have that discussion. Sure. Dalvin Cook is on rosters.
Yeah, I'm still holding on to him. I've actually was in a couple of super deep drafts recently where I picked him up in like round 38, 39 of my startup. I think there's still like a possibility. Could Dallas come calling and kick the tires on Dalvin Cook still? Right. Cheap deal. He didn't look very good last year, but I think he still has a little bit left in the tank to where I'll hold on to him. But there's some of these other guys, so like...
Yeah, okay.
I don't really...
Let's demonstrate the value of him. I'm going to give you an easy one first. If someone says, hey, Eric, I'm going to give you Brian Robinson for Dalvin Cook. That's easy, right?
Yeah, I'll take Brian Robinson easy.
Okay, all right. And he's like what, running back 22 in Dynasty, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take Ty Chandler over Dalvin Cook. So we're looking at like the 40s and 50s.
All right. How about Khalil Herbert or Dalvin Cook on your roster?
Khalil Herbert.
Is he? So he's not a roster clogger then, Herbert?
No, not at all.
Okay. You have Melvin Gordon is on your veterans list. You're seeing a lot of him on rosters?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some of him hanging around. Leonard Fournette I see on a lot of rosters too. I mean, Fournette's kind of in the Dalvin Cook bandwagon, same spot there, but Fournette couldn't even really play last year. I mean, he was on Buffalo for like a month there, and Ty Johnson was playing over him. So Fournette's probably done too.
All right, baby. You did it, Eric. I enjoyed having you here. I want you to go follow Eric on Twitter at Eric Vanek NFL, ERIC VANEK NFL. And it's also linked in the video description here. We told everybody about your podcast, America's Game, on the South Harmon Fantasy Football Network. I want to let everyone know right now you can get behind RotoWire's paywall for free. That's the best way to support this show. You just go to rotowire.com/pod. rotowire.com/pod. You put in your email, paywall unlocks all our premium content. You get 2 days there. And for some reason, if you don't want to stay or don't want to pay after the 2-day tour, it just lapses. You don't have to cancel. Anything more annoying, Eric, than signing up for a free trial? Then you have to go cancel the credit card. Pain in the ass, right?
Yes, absolute pain in the ass.
Yeah, all we do is we capture your email, so you'll get some email blast once in a while. You can opt out with one button. So put in your email. All the premium content unlocks. Did I miss anything that you want to tell anyone about, Eric?
No, not really. I would say the biggest thing is just stay on top of your rosters. Like, make sure you're using your maximum roster spots that you're allowed. Don't have empty roster spots. Always have somebody picked up, and then just keep churning these roster cloggers. You got to be thinking about, man, can I have this guy on my roster? Is he ever going to start in my lineup? And if he's not, it's probably droppable.
Odell Beckham?
I'm still holding on to him. It's Miami. It's a really, really good offense. I'll try and I'll hang on to him.
Who's the biggest name roster clogger that people are holding on to right now? No, and it can't be a free agent. Like, it has to be on a roster. Big name that you're like, I cannot, I mean, Odell probably, but you don't think he's a roster clogger. How about Tim Patrick? Is he a roster clogger on Denver?
I ended up picking him up just because he was free on waivers, but he could definitely end up being one just because there is like 3 or 4 guys ahead of him. Honestly, I think when it comes down to it, I think the biggest roster clogger for a lot of people is going to be Treylon Burks that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the show. I think I end up thinking he's going to be it. Yeah.
All right. No, Treylon Burks. I think you're right. He should have been the cover photo, but I had to put our beautiful faces on the thumbnail and cover. I mean, who wouldn't want to see us,
Exactly.
All right, everybody. We'll be back next week with another Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast.